Yeah.
All right, it's bad philosophy, and the cat is sufficiently distracted, ladies and
Yay,
gentlemen.
no cats.
Yay! So,
I mean, we like cats, but we don't like them interrupting the podcast.
right, right, right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're back. I'm here. I'm Stephen Torrance. I'm your host, and we got Kevin Saunders back on the show. It's really, it's just the two of us.
Yep.
Have we just eliminated the idea of having other people on Bad Philosophy? Has that
No, I don't
happened?
think so. Oso wants to come back. He actually asked me that.
Okay.
Should have him get back on. And now that we're doing this Google Hangout variant, it should be much easier to get people on.
You would think, but the whole
We
like,
have to
hey,
put
can
in
you
some
be
effort.
can you be online at this exact time?
Yeah, well, that's how it
Sure,
works.
to talk. And what I always hear is like, what are you guys going to be talking about? And
I don't
like,
know.
well, whatever. I mean, yeah, and whatever is not a good
What would
answer.
you like to talk about?
Right. So yeah, that's a problem. Maybe it's an
Yeah.
opportunity. It's an opportunity. Um, well, I guess we should just jump into what are we going to talk about.
Yeah, what
What
are we
we
going
are
to talk about,
talking
Steven?
about today. I'm going to begin with an epigram because
Good
that's what
idea.
we're supposed to do because of our rules, right?
Yes. Rules are
Ladies and
important.
gentlemen, rules are important. Kevin, what's your epigram this week?
I don't know if you've actually looked at the document ahead of time, so I'm just going
I
to.
have.
Okay. My epigram is I'm not here to make friends, said every
Hmm.
reality show contestant ever.
Yeah, yeah, you're on a reality show. That's not the nature of reality shows.
It's really
Um,
not, but
we'll,
that's.
we'll unpack that a little bit more, I suppose. But yeah, good
Yeah.
start. Mine is the human condition. It seems to me is that of possessing no moral safety net, no God, no scientific law, no amount of ethical concrete can protect us from falling off the moral tightrope that it is to be human. Whether that is terrifying or exhilarating is up to us. And that comes from Kenan Malik, whose book on the history of moral philosophy is was recently featured at the RSA. He did a talk there, and I heard that talk and kind of got the idea for today's show. Um, Generally, the topics of bad philosophy over the years have been things related to stuff going on in our lives, haven't they, Kevin?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair.
Somewhat.
Considering we have no editorial oversight whatsoever, we just talk about the things that are interesting to us at any given point
Yeah.
in time, and that often makes it into the show. So yes,
Says the man as he plays with his cat off
yes,
screen. Yeah.
he's having fun.
It looks, I don't know, it looks like you're speaking to the side of the screen.
Yeah. Well, if
It's all
people
right.
are
He's having
I don't know if people
yeah.
are actually like watching us,
There,
even though we have
man,
video versions of it. Like I don't know what our view count is. I
to,
suspect we're not over like the magical 300 where any view counts.
I suppose so, yeah.
But
Um,
I haven't seen what our videos are. What's our YouTube page anyway?
Bad Philosophy Show. We have 200 views total on all of our videos,
Okay.
which is not a ton. So we're,
It's, no, but we don't. I
we're
mean,
probably
we don't
just
have
live
huge
streaming
audiences
in the
anyway.
ether right
So
now. So I mean that opens me up to feel so much more comfortable. The problem is with that, it's like video goes up, it's like, oh, we had 200 views, we're so small, such a small podcast, and then like if you ever get big in the future, everybody goes back and watches all of your previous videos, and it's
yes,
like, oh yeah, these guys were so unprofessional back then. What the hell? And
yeah, nah,
nah, nah, nah, indeed. Um, Morality,
yeah.
ethics, stuff.
Um, Yeah, that,
So
I
Kevin,
mean,
okay, I got a question
I
for
feel
you.
like we've done this episode before, have we not?
We have. So in a
Okay.
way, it's like an update. It's not like where do moral values come from in general. I really do want to get to what are sort of the roots of our personal moral convictions right now.
Okay.
And so first, I kind of want to start off with like what do we mean by morality? What do we mean by ethics? As I sort of understand it, and as Ken and Malik presents it, the moral question, or sort of any moral system, it imagines, it does two things. It describes humanity or a person as they are, and then as they could be, and gives a reason why that difference is important, why becoming what that you could be is good, right, or
Hmm.
right, and then a way to get there. So a reason and a method. So for any person, right, like and that's what I think we sort of, we don't really often think about how deep morality goes. But like, as at least as I understand it, morality is your motivating factor, right? Like, for if there's sort of a driver for
I would
your actions
I would maybe
in
classify
the
it a little bit
world
differently
with
in how I
respect
see
to other
it.
humans. No, with respect to other humans, like that, in
I
that
see that.
sense.
I might disagree with it a little bit, or
Okay,
I might
you
classify it
want
slightly differently.
an alternative understanding of morality.
Yeah, if I were to sum it up in such ways, I would say it's a little more narrow than that. And that morality isn't necessarily your drive or morality to me is how you make decisions. Um, Sort of
About
your about anything. So given two options, option A, option B, um, morality is often the checksum that we use against that to sort of say, hey, is this should I go this way or that way?
uh-huh.
And not all things have moral decisions to be made around them. They're trivial things that exist in the world. Should
Sure.
I
Am I
have
going to pick my
pancakes or
waffle or
waffles? Yeah,
yeah?
and morality doesn't really come into play into those.
Mhm. Unless, like, you imagine yourself as you could be as a healthy person, a healthy individual, and the choice between pancakes or waffles is like, do I get the wheat pancakes and the wheat waffle? Like that.
Sure,
There's
and those scopes always flexible. And they're certainly
yeah,
not universal. There's not a this question is always trivial or this question is always moral.
right.
Um, and but when the question becomes non-trivial, I think morality is what people use independently, internally,
Hmm.
to guide them to a decision.
So we talk about like the moral compass, right, and sort of
Mm-hmm.
the frameworks of that. And it's helpful, I guess, or it might be, to briefly summarize Ken and Malik's summary. So you're getting a shadow of a projection of a
Welcome to the
reflection
cave,
here.
everybody.
But yeah, right, everybody get your shadow watching popcorn. Um, roughly, roughly, you can treat like some major conception, like not necessarily progress, but like general conceptions of morality have come from religion,
Yeah,
in its intertwined nature with culture.
yeah.
In generally in the West, he actually lumps Greece and India together in this kind of notion of gods and forces that are not good. Like many of them have vices and are sort of huge powers beyond their control, that man must be able to reason with, essentially. Like you
Okay.
just sort of have to, um, you have to treat these entities as these powerful forces of nature that you have to sort of deal with and work around. Kind of similarly, but in a slightly different sense, in some Eastern conceptions, the gods are similarly so, they don't embody perfect virtue um, or absolute power, but sort of the randomness of the universe, and that the role of morality is to sort of carve out a space for human dignity to exist
Mm-hmm.
in an uncertain and random universe. And then as we get into kind of the 21st century, then as you get to later sort of the Abrahamic faiths, the monotheistic faiths, the
Yeah.
God, the singular God, becomes both the reason and the end of morality. God is, the perfect being, and being with God is the end. And so we get rules, we get, Scripture kind of laying down ethical laws to
Mm-hmm.
follow, to be a good person and to be with God. Enlightenment comes along, sort of dismantles that way of thinking. No, man himself is capable of. We get the era in which our Constitution was written, this very humanistic, like deism era type thing, where man alone is capable of, or humanity alone is capable of directing themselves morally without the need of of a god or any gods or any sort of system of this nature. So humanism, secular humanism.
Mm-hmm.
But then with the turn of the century, disillusionment with these ideas, and you sort of there's a great quote in there he has that, like, if Nietzsche was the chief if Nietzsche gave the eulogy at God's funeral, he was also the biggest celebrant at reason's wake. Like he sort of kicked off the he both killed God for once and for all, and kicked off the postmodern attack on
Of course, I would think
on the Enlightenment.
I would say Nietzsche didn't kill God. I think Nietzsche recognized something in society
That God was dead already.
and labeled that as God is dead, meaning that, that religion was no longer the primary motivator within society. Not that.
Mm-hmm. It was this sort of humanistic, industrialistic.
Yes.
And then sort of as those fell apart, as postmodernism has sort of taken everything apart, we were in a shaky moral position. I mean, I think you can give that the history of moral philosophy, and you can still go out there and find examples of any particular person, any particular one of those ways in different people, right? Like, so all those sort of moral systems are coexisting. He brings up one other, which is that this idea that morality has an its greatest strength now in the negotiation between individuals, that moral choice is always a choice to do one thing or another with or to another person, and that they don't sort of exist on their own, right? Like, I can't just be a good person. I can only do good things, and only do good things to a person who agrees that that is good or bad.
Yeah.
And that those negotiations happen continuously and sort of fluidly. So I wanted to ask you, Kevin, like, do you see any of those systems in you? Like, where sort of is the seat for your moral choices, right?
It's a good question, and I don't exactly examine my morals very often. And
how are they tested, though? Like what sort of moral when have you most recently, like, been aware that you were making a moral decision?
That's a weird thought. I don't know. I mean, I've dealt with some conflict in my life recently, just in terms of things that have been going on at work. But I don't know if I ever felt that it was I mean, I guess maybe it was, in the sense that, a big part of my morality is comes from the idea of what I consider being polite, which I'm not always good at. And that's sort of a very twee way of saying it. But it comes from the idea of trying to have perspective and trying to not let my perspective, my singular perspective, overshadow that of other people, which I know sounds so very silly when I talk about that on this show, where I have a tendency for yelling "you're wrong." But that's
right.
I hope
but
that's
where does that "you're wrong" come from, right? Like, is that when are you sort of compelled to?
I would also argue that "you're wrong" is not that quote "you're wrong." Is not something that I use nearly as much as I used to in my day-to-day life. I mean, we've been doing this 7+ years, and I'm definitely different philosophically than I was then. I would say different morally than I was then.
Mhm.
When that first "you're wrong" was ever shouted to whoever happened to be nearby at the time. And um, so, and on something like this, I feel on bad philosophy, I have a willingness to sort of let that guard down.
Mhm.
Although to be fair, I do it in real life a lot as well. I don't always notice it until after the fact, and I feel bad about it. Um,
Well, I want to kind of return to the politeness. Do you
yeah,
think that that's like that the politeness is almost you? I don't want to say feigning, but like sort of like perpetuating the moral system that you feel is appropriate in that situation at that time, even if it may
yeah.
differ from your own.
I think there's some truth to that, and sort of being there's definitely sort of the fact that other people exist is a big part of my moral compass. So I try to, when possible, when interacting with other people, give the benefit of the doubt, and that's what I'm trying to say when I mean being polite. Is sort of that
Hmm.
assumption of they're not. Rarely is someone actively trying to make someone else mad or do something to harm other people, which is what I think another big part of my morality comes from is I desire to do no harm, and that's
Hmm.
a whole thing. What is that? What does that entail? Is that even possible? Is it possible to measure those sorts of things? Yeah, probably not. But that's something I try and do is minimize the impact of and mean things or bad things I do to other people, which, if I take it another step further, kind of goes back to the golden rule. Treat others as you would have them treat you
And it
before they
is
do it to
that's
you.
might be an observation that Ken and Malik makes, but that like that idea of
Mm-hmm.
reciprocity, right, or
Mm-hmm. But I would
responsiveness
say
to others.
I don't do that because I want them to treat me that way.
Hmm.
Or because I expect them to treat me that way. I guess what I should say, which is when you say reciprocity, that's what makes me think of. It's like, well, I'm going to treat you like this,
You
so you'll do this for me. Um,
it's like a stance. It's sort of a mode that you just act from.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I definitely try to make sure that that's where I at least start off from in
Hmm.
my day-to-day life. And I'm not successful, so there's definitely something about this sort of person I am versus person I'd like to be mindset. I certainly see that
Yeah.
that I am not how I would always like to be, but that's definitely a part of it. And I mean, I fall back on I think the closest thing to a moral code that that is like something that I can use in my everyday life as opposed to a lot of religious rules and things like that that I grew up with and kind of definitely have as a part of my being. Those don't always those are very on a metaphysical side of things, whereas my day-to-day life I fall back on things like the Scout Oath and Law from being a Boy Scout,
Huh.
um, because those are very easy rules, not very easy rules, but they're very clear. A Scout is 12 things. That's seven. I'm holding up. Pretend there's
Hmm.
two more. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Um, those are things that I can check myself against in a very easy way. And there's not always a choice, when we're getting to those moral choices where one tips the scales one way or the other. You know, uh, the example we always used in Scout Camp was uh, you see someone who needs help with their groceries, but mom told you had to be home by 7, and it's almost 7. It's like, well, you're supposed to be courteous and polite and kind, but you're also supposed to be obedient and reverent, which goes towards your parents as well as the spiritual side of things. It's like, well, one of those isn't better than the other, but you have to sort of judge those things. Um, so it actually is something that I kind of fall back on sometimes,
Hmm.
as not as a moral code in sort of the knighthood sense.
Yeah, those are
Uh,
more virtues, right? That sort of comes from a virtue ethics standpoint, where you want to embody the character traits of a virtuous person. You
Mhm.
sort of have that like ideal.
Sure.
Um, but what is and that sort of conundrum is a great question. Like, what is the virtuous action there still,
Hmm.
and like who determines that?
Well, and being
Um,
a postmodernist, I can say there's not always a right answer. They can both be virtuous and still have downsides, and I'm okay with that. That flexibility or not having a lack of answer, which I think the early virtuists might disagree with. They say that there must be a right answer,
mhm.
whereas I definitely feel there's a plurality of right answers.
Well, and I guess as it comes down to, you're making the decision, right? Like you're
Yeah.
sort of you're there in the moment. There's the groceries, and then there's your mom at home, and you make a decision. And it's
Hmm.
not, and when you make a decision, and this is sort of like the thrust of ethics is when you make that choice in any of like the trolley problems or any of these
Yeah.
sort of ethics, like if you're in the world and you make that it's easy to sort of think about, well, hypothetically under this moral system you do this, that, and the other, like, but
Hmm.
when the rubber meets the road, like where does that choice, where is the action potential, when do we reach readiness potential, and how, like, what triggers that? Is because another thing I can bring up here is like Dawkins and the recent, or Sam Harris and the atheist crowd are like, they believe that the seat of morality is in the brain, right? So we just have certain brain dispositions that will determine whether we do one thing or another, and
Hmm.
all ethical systems are sort of reflections of or abstractions of these deeper moral tendencies within the brain. But at some point, I think as the argument goes, like, well, if the brain state, the brain states that we label to be, or the brain areas or operations that we label to be ethical, are going to be affected by our conception of ethical behavior. And so it's not like they're, and the brain states are themselves whatever they are.
Hmm.
They're independent of our conceptions, but that
Well, if that's the answer, then there's no reason to talk about it. Like, oh,
yeah,
that's
it really it's not a good spot to go, because there's still, what do we decide
it
to
doesn't
label
matter because it doesn't
right?
matter. That's the sort of
Um,
that's the same sort of argument you get that I think gets levied against a lot of post-structuralists and postmodernists of moral relativism reigns supreme. I don't think that's actually the case, but when your answer is there is no control, it's like, well, okay, then let's stop talking about it. Of course, we can't because there's no control.
well, no, and you
Eh.
really, I think you can stop talking about it, and this gets into another thing. It's like, well, just live it. Like, actually put, I don't know, like, think about actual moral conundrums that we faced in the 21st century, right? Like, do we
Yeah.
use nuclear weapons to kill millions of people? Do we allow genocide? Which people do we prosecute for war crimes? The people on the winning side, why? Um, in a way, like, this is the domain of law, right?
Sure.
Law is applied ethics,
They're
very much so.
codified, I would say, more
Yeah.
so than applied, because as I'm sure you're well aware, law is not always applied systematically.
No, and I mean,
But
it gets
we
harder and
have that
harder.
code to fall back on. So a codified ethics, maybe.
But I sort of wonder if law, it, this gets at, like, okay, moral systems change, right? Like,
Yes.
there were laws on the books about burning witches, about stoning homosexuals. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there were
There are
laws
influences.
in place. And so what is it beyond? This is sort of the relationship between the law and morality, which is a different question maybe, and one we've never really tackled. But like, um, clearly there's something beyond the laws that we've written down, even like the ethical codes we've written down. There's something that makes them change. There's something that makes our moral conceptions change. And what is that? What is that mechanism?
Yeah.
Um, another theory, I'll just put this out there, like the idea that, how did he put it? This is again from the Keenan Malik talk. Man should not ask the meaning of his life, but must recognize rather that it is he who is asked.
Say that again.
Man must not ask the meaning of his life, but rather must recognize that it is he who is asked, he who is being asked. Kind of, I don't know. It's almost like a existence precedes essence.
Okay.
Sort of a statement, right? To recognize to get into any of these moral systems, you have to start from the existence of humanity, right? And something like physical, like the embodied self. And moral decisions, we always go like, I had a gut feeling to do this, that, or the other, right? Like moral decisions seem to originate somewhere else, right? You know, I'm not I don't go through a consequentialist like utilitarian calculation in a split second. Nobody can do that, right? Like, I'm not going to be able to work out all the consequences of a particular thing in that moment. I'm going to just act from something that's already there in my mind. Even you, I don't think when you're making a moral decision like in a split second, you're not going to think through like the Boy Scout things of like,
but I've embodied those long enough that I have a feel for them.
Okay.
Or at least I like to think I do.
Right.
No, I don't sit back and go through those 12 points or the Scout Oath and go, well, how do I? Okay. No, I mean I trust my gut, but that has been honed by years of kind of thinking about that, and when those extra tough decisions coming along, doing my best to meet them.
It's been conditioned in a way, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we get conditioned for morality from birth. I'm gonna sneeze real quick.
Okay.
It
was a pretty quick sneeze. Oh.
Yeah, it's from staring at this bright light I have here. Bright lights make me sneeze.
It's like a small percentage of the population has that.
I'm definitely in that group.
Apparently it like correlates with higher cross connectivity between the hemispheres of the brain.
Yeah. I heard it was because your eyes, the dilating eye thing, was very close to the sneeze reflex nerve.
Yeah, and so if you have like, I don't know, more nerve density in that area, they tend to sort of affect each other.
Oh yeah, conditioning.
Conditioning.
So regardless of where those morals come from, they're definitely conditioned from an early age. That's what parents do. That's what society does to young people. Is we send them to school and we teach them not just the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s and how to math, but how to interact with each other. Share your toys. Don't bite. These rules. There's the relatively famous book, Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And there's some truth to that sort of thing in terms of how moral systems are imbued in people. Again, regardless of where they come from, they're usually similar to those of the people around us in terms of morals. Maybe not in the creation thereof, but in the application of those systems. So that whatever's going on internally doesn't necessarily have to match from person A to person B as long as the results are the same on a societal level, which I think they often are. Not universally or even broadly, but we see similar patterns of behaviors that we call morality.
It gets at the question, so once these patterns start hitting each other, which is really, I mean, we're starting to see this, instead of literally hitting each other and fighting each other with weapons, where like, okay, within the borders of this space, this ethical system reigns supreme, and then, if we bump up against a barrier where there's like all the ideals are different, we can fight them and take them over and either lose and just, integrate our system or we could, win and then, replace their system with ours. nowadays that battle seems to be happening in a much more intellectual space, right? So you
So we're
look
not
on
killing
Reddit.
each other anymore. So
No, we're just
the
creating
not
extremely long
killing
Reddit
each other,
threads about,
the
yeah.
not killing each other moral seems to have been creeping up over time.
So what? But why is okay? We I'd say like humanity
Yeah.
tends to take things like murdering another person, like that tends to be pretty universally not okay in at least the societies that have
Except
emerged,
for
right?
given definitions of murder. So that's the
Yeah,
interesting thing.
yeah.
I mean, look at things like the death penalty, which is still legal in how many states, including Texas, and
Mm,
practiced regularly. You look at things like justifiable killing in war. That's often considered something that's different from murder. We don't look at our veterans who have killed people in wars across the world and say murderer, although some people do. I'm,
right.
for what it's worth, very against the death penalty, and not sure how I feel about veterans killing people, because often it's a kill or be killed situation, but they chose to put themselves there, and it's complex.
But they didn't choose to put themselves in the exact circumstances,
Yes,
though.
and
Yeah.
that's where it becomes really tricky. Whereas when we decide to kill somebody for doing something bad or whatever we deem bad, that's a very deliberate choice that we as a society continue to make
Hmm.
for whatever reason. And
And
it's
and that, yeah, I mean, and these are obviously big questions. Let's just keep
of
them rolling.
course.
Do you have like a question along this line of reasoning?
Do I have a question?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe that kind of derailed it.
Yeah.
I feel like what I guess I'm trying to get out here is trying to come up with like a social conception of morality, right? Like, in Facebook has weirdly enough done a lot to further this. This idea that, okay, you know, can we really ascribe like wrongness or rightness to actions on Facebook? Like, is posting certain content wrong? Is interacting with people in certain ways wrong? And can we easily have that discussion on Facebook? I think Ken and Malik's point is we sort of have built tools around our moral assumptions, and for instance on Facebook, that like you can't unlike, you can remove a like, but you can't
Dislike.
hate something, right? I can't
Yeah.
dislike a post.
Although
I
for
can
what it's
hide
worth,
it.
I do have
I can,
a Facebook like sticker upside down on the back of my computer. Sorry, I looked at that
uh,
forgetting my camera was on the thing. I got one. My mother bought me a mustache mug from Facebook Gifts,
uh,
and it came with a little like thing, and I'm like, I'm gonna fight the system.
zip, yeah.
Upside down on my computer.
Okay, and protest. That's a really good point. Like, just the general idea of protesting, right? The charges leveled against the 99% movement were like, well, you're just complaining. You don't have a better idea. And it's like, I really feel protest is coming from a place that doesn't really offer alternatives, and is really just,
Hmm.
it's like the gut feeling of a society. It's just like, if things well up enough that people are screaming and yelling and saying this is wrong, that we are listening collectively to something deeper, and we may not be able to say why. And that may be more and more of a problem as the 21st century goes on, that it may be harder to recognize that kind of protest as legitimate and necessary and constructive for a society, as it has been for many hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Yeah.
I mean, because we're seeing, like, for instance, we're seeing a lack of, I guess, responsiveness to such things as what they are, which is a very human-rooted reaction against something. So an institution like the FCC, yeah, I mean, you can stand outside of their offices, but you talk about like the communications complex, and it's like this sort of disembodied thing that
Hmm.
we're trying to protest. We're like trying to figure out the ways that like emotions can be conveyed through the internet, and I think that the internet is just a very bad medium for doing that. Things like turning websites black, and slowing down traffic to the FCC, and all this are like paltry attempts
Yeah.
to sort of recreate pain, right? Like the pain of actually having to deal with people yelling at you for something that you are doing wrong in their opinion.
Yeah.
And I think it's just very easy for institutions to turn off all of those signals and just be like, reduce it to reason realm, and look, your reasons are terrible, so therefore we are correct, and then not and remove it from the visceral reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's almost like allowing a murderer to just sort of reason his way through a thing, and like without having to like confront the family of like the people he's killed or something. Like he can just sort of talk disembodied, and like we're unable to really relate then anymore, because it's not human communication at that point. And I think morality is deeply rooted in communication and in empathy with other human beings.
Yes, which is kind of where I was talking about being polite. Maybe empathetic is a better word, or sympathetic as opposed to empathetic. But being able to understand other people have a lot going through too.
So Slomo Dziedzic,
Moral
because
compass.
we love him. He really likes to think about this stuff and has done a couple of films. I think, what is it? Film and Ideology. Oh, God. A Pervert's Guide to the Cinema and A Pervert's Guide to Ideology are his two films. But what I wanted to bring up is, Slomo Dziedzic? Have we not talked about him before?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Wow. Oh, yeah, that needs to happen at some point.
Okay.
Because one of the examples he gives, and I mean, he's crazy, maybe brilliant. Starbucks, for instance, recognized that we sort of have a moral need to feel. It used to be you had to I think we may have talked about this on a previous show. Like, used to be you had to donate directly to a cause. Starbucks went, no, we're a moral organization, so just by buying our things, you are being a good person, right? And we'll just be good for you. That kind of deferring of the responsibility, and those words, responsibility, right? Like I don't really have the ability to respond to someone who is impacted by such a choice as like buying a cup of coffee from a particular place, right? I just can't do that, and therefore it's very tough to sort of have a moral sense in that case, isn't it? So like more and more of our lives they just sort of fall in this terrible moral gray area where we can't even. It's not like there isn't a right way. It's like we can't even figure out whether there is a right decision there.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sensing that anymore? In the same way that I am, or?
Maybe. I don't know. This is getting a little head trippy for me, and my allergies are acting up, so my brain is not fully functioning.
We've kind of brought it back around to like the beginning of this 3-episode arc. This has sort of been our question here.
Yeah.
I mean, bring it back to an individual level, though. Like we can, I think what happens is that like because of that, like on a social level, on a political level, we are then more inclined on a personal level to do the same sort of thing. Like if I'm on a bus, I can just put my earphones in, and there may be like an argument going on over there, or like a person who needs help, and I just may not notice them, or I may be like more like because I've sort of created sort of a bubble for myself, or I can just like pull up my phone and be like, oh, I didn't notice that happening, right? We just sort of walk past each other on the streets. It like makes us more inclined to lose that empathic connection.
Yeah. And I've wondered about that as well in the past. I mean, just in terms of, there's definitely people who are maybe fearful of technology and the impact it'll have. I don't consider myself one of those, but the worrying about the lack of connectivity, and I think that it's not that it's necessarily going away. I think it's changing, and I think the social circles that exist today are different than they were pre-internet. And I think the moral circles change because of that as well, because something we haven't really talked about that I think kind of goes back to the groceries or be late question. My gut instinct for that response has always been well, you got to be home on time. That's the more important thing because you have a relationship with your mother already that exists. Um, and there's something I think to a to distance in terms of morality
Mm.
that I'm just kind of starting to put together in my head. But the idea that the better I am related to someone, be it not necessarily a blood relation, but the closer I am to somebody, the stronger my moral compass towards them, which I think is why you can put your headphones on and ignore the people on the bus, or I think is why you can vote to kill somebody with the death penalty that you've never met.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. Yeah, same sort of thing has
because
happened.
because
Yeah.
there's a distancing there, and I think things like the internet have changed who we are close to, so that one person's moral group or social group may not be physically close to each other, whereas in the past that was always the case. Your
Mm.
neighbors were your social group, the people you saw on a day-to-day basis because you walked out of your house and interacted with them. Um, and so that distance has changed. It's now a distance through the internet, through interactions digitally. And we've talked about you only can have this many 150 social people in your network, or else it starts breaking down.
Yeah, the Dunbar
Um,
number.
the Dunbar number, and that's sort of, and so as those numbers have grown on the digital space, they in the physical realm have become smaller. I don't know anybody who lives in my apartment complex.
Actually, because Dunbar was on an RSA talk recently, actually that's not true. That as social network sizes have theoretically increased, they've found that people's level of like close friends and then like second level group friends, like physical friends that they and time that they spend with people in the real world, that size has actually stayed relatively constant. So we just sort of increased the theoretical number of people that we're connected to,
Okay,
but
but maybe the number
actually
has,
it's close to
I guess,
it's
has
the
the.
same. Like it hasn't actually gone down. Yeah.
Okay,
So it's like we still have that conception, but we have like this other sphere, and like the edges get a lot more confusing, I
yeah.
think.
Well, and I would argue, or I would ask, how many of those people in that number that isn't changing, so the number is staying the same, but how many people in that physical space group are based on or enforced by the larger digital group, as opposed to being enforced by some other methodology, such as physical relationship, the fact that we ride the bus the same place every day, or the fact that, you live 2 doors down from me. I'm curious what the overlap there is, and if there aren't more in that 150 social nearby that are enforced by the larger digital scale.
I mean I can only speak from experience, and I mean you're personally there now, and I was there. Like the experience of being in the Apple Store
Mm-hmm.
was, and almost quantifiably, but I felt it too. Was like the closest knit I'd ever felt in a community of
Mm-hmm.
people. And what were the elements there? Like you were all working with sort of the same vocabulary in the same
Mm-hmm.
place
Uh-huh.
at this frequently. Like you were spending a lot of time with these people, and there was a responsibility to them, because you could very easily see how your actions affected the other people that you worked with. So
Yes.
there was sort of all those factors were there, and what happened then is that like being in that physically tight community made the digital community that I felt I was capable of being part of much smaller. And then
Yes.
after leaving the Apple Store, I felt like I'm much more capable of being part of a larger digital community. But the types of relationships are not as strong. I really have to. I can say that. Like I'm finding fewer. I don't have a community, right? Like, and that's I think a place that a lot of people in the 21st century in the modern world find themselves. Uh,
Yes.
yeah.
No, I definitely agree that, and I can see that. Yeah, there's a lot of power there in terms of how the digital and the social interact with each other, digital or physically social.
So it's like
Um,
we're getting misaligned there, right? Like the priorities of our interactions in general, and like the kind of knowledge and the kind of work we're doing
Uh-huh.
are diverging very much so, and almost like going off orthogonally into the internet, right? Like it's going into this other communication layer that is physically, you're right, it's like this distance, it's physically separated from the physicality of being in the world next to other people. So like, you know, your apartment complex example, I think everyone would agree with that. Most people probably don't know their next door neighbors in modern apartment complexes, much less talk with them on a regular basis. And there are awkward moments where you're sort of forced to recognize that, oh my God, there are these people that I live around and I don't know them, and it's kind of scary.
I'm surrounded by strangers.
and that's terrible. Like that really, it's like deeply disconcerting, right?
It is a little bit. Yes, it is a little bit weird and disconcerting. But that didn't used to be the case.
Why don't we just like go next door and say hi to people, right? Like, why doesn't that happen? Do we feel like we don't?
Too many people
There's no reason to, or
my digital social circle.
Like we just feel we don't have the capacity to do that. Like we're already, all our slots are full, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's really interesting how they sort of can affect each other. Like I was sort of forced, I guess, for that to happen in the Apple world, but once I was in it, that felt really good.
Uh-huh.
And so I don't know if I would have sought it otherwise. So, and I think this is where people are finding that it's like they're missing something, but they don't know what they're missing, and there's not enough of a compulsion to go find it, right? Or we don't feel like we can easily put ourselves into a community easily enough.
Yeah.
You got blurry and bright and stuff all of a sudden.
I was adjusting my my enhancement. Now I'm in black and white.
Yay! Yeah, because the world is just shades of gray.
I was just trying to make it a little greener, or a little less green. Which I realized I could have done like an hour ago, but didn't, so whatever.
No, that's okay. Something compelled you. Some moral obligation took you over.
I kept staring at my face, and I thought it was green, and that was weird, so that's what compelled me.
Yeah. I don't know if we want to leave it here. I mean, this is a big question.
Of course it is, and we're never gonna answer it. We've dealt with it before, and we'll probably deal with it again sometime in the future. But
I think it would be interesting to revisit, and especially see. Oh my God, it feels like.
We'll do it again.
Yeah. Have things gotten worse? Have they gotten better? Can we even tell? Yeah. I don't know. Well, I'm going to do a thing tonight that sort of relates to this, pun intended. There's a group of people working in Austin on a thing called authentic relating, and I don't know if I've talked about this on a show before. Have I?
I don't think so. If you do, I don't remember it.
It's just like using kind of mindfulness practice and kind of like the games we did at Texas Tech in the residence halls. Get people into a circle, get them physically interacting, like break the ice, and then get them noticing things about each other and connecting. And you remember, like the community building, like it's a thing you have to do now, right? I think this is maybe what I was getting at earlier. Is Apple built that community in virtue of, all right, we're going to have a store, there are going to be people in it. But you can build community in much more lightweight ways, right? Like there were bonds formed over, a game that took half an hour in college. Like I saw this, the people that literally met each other because you counted them off and like they all went into a group. They would like stay together for 3 years. Right, like there was some bond there that formed in that moment, and it's difficult. It just takes like recognizing it and being intentional about it. I think in general people aren't thinking in those terms. There's a lot of mistrust. There's a lot of suspicion. There's like that feeling like I'm alone with a bunch of strangers. And it takes someone else going, no, y'all are related. That is a fact.
Deal with it.
And just like from tautology, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's leave it here for now.
Okay.
It's not going to go anywhere. I also have to pee.
Okay. I will wrap things up while you do that. if
Well,
you'd like,
I can
and then we'll
wait.
figure out post shows.
You can,
Okay.
it's not like
All
not
right.
like 4 alarm chili.
Good. Because now I've got a mental image, and it's not any better than what I was thinking before. So, um, been there, been
You're
there.
welcome, America.
Birds going in, coming out. This has been an interesting arc. I think so. We'll have a rule set update episode next. We were going to have
Yes.
one today, but I realized that we hadn't actually had 3 episodes. So we'll change, remove, and add rules
Yeah.
soon. Maybe next week, maybe the week after.
I'm
Before
totally
episode
willing to
1.
say, hey, comment on this somewhere if you have opinions on what the next one should be. What's the audience doing next time? Last time they removed a rule. Is it add
Audience
or change?
is adding. Audience is
Okay.
adding. I am changing, or I am removing, and you are adding.
Okay. They're
That is
changing.
the next in the sequence.
Yeah.
Huh?
So I'm changing.
Yeah, you're changing.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to make a suggestion for what to add, I know we said we'll just invite somebody on, but that didn't happen. Feel free to leave comments on what rule you think we should add to the Bad Philosophy Prodcast. Prodcast. There's a word you haven't heard in a long time.
Podcast. Have we used that one before? I feel like we made that mistake.
No, we said prod. Remember, there was an old thing where I would like jab you with a cattle prod, prodcasting. Way back when.
So
that's like early. That's like deep cut.
Yeah.
Early Bad Philosophy.
Yeah. If we can,
it was a callback on purpose.
If you want to, Deuce Plume, if you're out there, aka Squeezy, if you want to go through all of Bad Philosophy and find Prodcasting, find that.
It was one of the video episodes we did. It was when we were recording in Hewlin Clement in like their conference rooms. I can remember it. Early, like first 4.
Well, I'm probably going to cut all this because this was technically the outro. But
okay.
Fun fact, and yes, Prodcasting. This has been Bad Philosophy. I'm Stephen Torrance. You can find me online at @storrance, and I guess I'll announce it here because it won't go out to that many people. But I'm pretty close to launching a Patreon channel for my sign language stuff, and we're also pretty close to launching a Patreon channel for Bad Philosophy.
Yeah, we're definitely moving in that direction.
We are. Crowdfunding, it's a thing. It might be more of a thing for me than for this show, just considering the fan base.
Yeah,
but
more people will give you money than they will give us money.
Hopefully, we'll see. It might be that they will not give either of us money under any circumstance.
That's also a possibility.
But as we didn't even get into like the whole question of standards of value and all this, but maybe that'll be another day.
That's okay.
Vote, make moral decisions with your dollars. And then, Kevin, do you have any announcements to make?
No. I've started reading the entire run of John Constantine Hellblazer, the original comic series from like the 80s to 2013.
All right. I got the new McSweeney's. I got that.
Did you?
In the mail. Yep.
That's the Latin American Mysteries or something like that?
The Latin American crime stories, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that one looked really cool. I'm totally going to buy it on eBay when it shows up.
Or you could just borrow it from me after I'm done reading it.
Yeah, well, I think you have known this about me, Stephen, but I'm totally like a collector of things. I like to have sets, and so like yesterday I bought a couple more issues on eBay, old back issues. And I almost bought one last time I went to Half Price Books, but I wanted $50 for it, and I was kind of like, eh.
How many? How close are you to completing your collection?
Nowhere near. I've got maybe 4 or 5 issues of McSweeney's currently.
Okay, and they're like 4. $10 a piece, 15 resold, like.
Depending on how, like the new ones, you can get for as little as like $5 plus shipping if you know where to look. The older ones, and there's some rare ones that go for like a few $100s. I'm not trying to get those right now. But I bought issue 42, which is the same. It's got 6 stories told like 12 times. So they get like retranslated out of English and then back into English and out of English and back into English.
Awesome.
And so like, and I mean, this is the thing. Like, I'm like this is why I love this magazine, is because they do things like this. Um, so yeah, that's when I was like, it was like $4 plus free shipping on eBay. Buy it now in quote unquote acceptable condition, meaning nothing's broken about it. I'm like, well, yeah, because I'm not a mint collector. I just like to have the things because they're fun and I want them, not because I
Awesome.
plan on reselling them in the future.
Well, I'm going to wrap it up. We're
Okay.
already past an hour.
Yeah, we'll just
Thank you for watching and or listening to Bad Philosophy. If you want to weigh in on this, it's the internet. You can comment on things. It's
yeah.
okay that you didn't watch the live stream.
Suggest new rules.
Yeah,
We're going to pick one that somebody suggests, probably, unless we get a live guest to actually make a change on air.
yep. And yeah, we'll put links to the all the stuff we mentioned in the show notes of the video, and of course on badphilosophy.com. You can follow us still, twitter.com/badphilosophy, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.